Welcome back to The Explainer. So let's jump straight into our weekly agricultural updates. Right now, if you look at India's agricultural systems, we are literally watching a high-stakes domino effect play out in real time. We're talking about a massive collision of extreme weather, geopolitical friction, and some really heavy market shifts that are completely reshaping the rural economy. So let's dive into the headlines and figure out what exactly is going on.
Okay, to start off, look at this absolutely bizarre paradox flagged by the IMD. For the first week of May, the all-India pre-monsoon rainfall was a massive 79% above normal. I mean, that's just staggering. We are seeing these unseasonal, super heavy thunderstorm-like showers just saturating parts of the south, east, and northeast. But as we all know, in agriculture, one isolated data point never, ever tells the whole story.
Because right alongside all that excess rain, we're seeing this. 45 degrees Celsius. It is absolutely sweltering out there. Despite all that moisture in the east, severe heat waves are just baking the northwest and central regions of the country. Pockets of Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and Maharashtra, they are experiencing brutal daytime maximums. And this just perfectly illustrates the extreme whiplash volatility that farmers are dealing with on the ground right now as they prep for the upcoming season.
Here's how we're going to break it all down today. First, we'll hit headlines and agroclimate realities. Then, crop intelligence and regional hotspots, followed by input economics and market signals. After that, we'll look at systems interpretation and farmer impact, and finally, wrap up with our strategic outlook and actionable insights. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Headlines and Agroclimatic Realities.
So diving into the agroclimatic analysis, the IMD is projecting the 2026 southwest monsoon rainfall to hit just 92% of the long-period average. That 8% deficit? Yeah, that's being driven by a developing El Niño. Now, don't let the single digits fool you. This isn't just some minor shortfall. This sets up a massive structural threat for rain-fed Kharif systems across the whole country, significantly bumping up the chances of clustered dry spells right during those absolutely critical growth stages.
Moving on to Section 2, Crop Intelligence and Regional Hotspots.
Let's look at the regional hotspots. Up in the northwest, we've got a massive wheat harvest coming in, but it is seriously threatened by heat risk. Then, down in central India, crops like soybean and pulses are staring down a really severe rain-fed El Niño risk. You know, a dry spell there could completely devastate the plants right as they're trying to form beans and pods. And down in the south, sugarcane is facing acute water stress from earlier deficits and all this extreme heat. Basically, farmers in these zones are being forced to react to very specific, highly localized pressures.
And as a direct result of all those pressures, just take a look at the crop intelligence data on year-over-year summer acreage changes. Summer rice acreage is down by about 2.47 lakh hectares. Meanwhile, pulses are up, and coarse cereals, they are up a massive 28%. And this brilliantly illustrates what's happening on the ground. Farmers are already structurally diversifying away from water-intensive, highly vulnerable summer rice, and they're pivoting toward crops that actually have a fighting chance against climate volatility and lower water availability.
Section 3. Input Economics and Market Signals.
Okay, focusing on input economics for a second, we have to talk about this sudden 3 rupee per liter hike in petrol and diesel. This completely ends a 4-year freeze on fuel prices. Look, we all know how much it stings to fill up our own gas tanks right now, right? But for farmers, this isn't just a number at the pump. It's an immediate direct inflation of transport, logistics, and maybe most importantly, irrigation costs for anyone relying on a diesel pump.
And then we've got the fertilizer situation, which is honestly giving us 2 completely different realities. On one side, official government messaging is assuring everyone that stocks are comfortable, saying over 51% of the Kharif seasonal requirement is already met. But on the flip side, independent analysts are sounding a really stark warning. They're pointing out that the ongoing Hormuz blockade and the conflict in the Middle East have sharply raised landed costs. That makes future supply chains incredibly fragile as we get deeper into the season.
So, analyzing the market and policy signals in response to all these stresses, we are seeing some really aggressive interventions. The government just extended the sugar export ban to September 30th to protect domestic supply. They've also rolled out major Kharif minimum support price, or MSP hikes, like a 622 rupees per quintal jump for sunflower seed. That's deliberately meant to push acreage toward oilseeds and pulses. On top of that, Punjab is aggressively scaling a diversification scheme, offering a 7,000 rupees per acre cash incentive to literally pay farmers to shift from water-heavy paddy to maize.
Now, these are sweeping structural market signals. They're designed to control inflation and essentially force crop diversification. But it begs a really critical question that we absolutely have to ask. Are these policies actually reaching the farmer at the farm gate?
Let's find out in Section 4, Systems Interpretation and Farmer Impact.
When we look at the farmer-level implications, there's a pretty stark gap between policy intent and ground reality. The whole intent behind MSP hikes is to boost farmer income and shift acreage, right? Yet, despite a bumper, near 120 million ton wheat harvest, procurement bottlenecks mean a lot of farmers in states like Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh are being forced into distress sales. They're actually having to sell their crops below the official 2,585 rupee wheat MSP. So the crucial point here is that a bumper harvest isn't necessarily translating into bumper profits. And notice how this just continues to build the pressure. Remember that 3 rupee diesel hike we talked about? Well, Punjab farmers are warning that this hike alone is going to add anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 rupees per acre just to their paddy cultivation costs. It's a sheer mathematical squeeze. If you're relying on groundwater and running those diesel pumps, your margins are absolutely obliterated before you even plant a single seed. So, for a clear systems interpretation, what we're witnessing is this relentless causal cascade. Think about it. It starts with global geopolitical shocks over in the Middle East. That triggers surging input and fuel costs domestically. Then add in severe climate and heat volatility, and the end result? Squeezed farm incomes, even when the fields are actually producing bumper yields. It's literally a domino effect that connects global supply chains directly to rural livelihoods in India.
Which brings us to Section 5, Strategic Outlook and Actionable Insights. All right, here is our strategic outlook for the next 4 to 8 weeks. Late May is going to see those heat waves peaking, which will severely stress late-stage crops. Early June, that is the crucial window for the monsoon onset over Kerala. Moving into July and August, we've got a really high risk of El Niño-driven dry spells that could just hammer rain-fed systems. And finally, keep a close eye on September 30th. That's when the sugar export ban is scheduled to expire, which is going to cause some massive ripples in domestic pricing.
Based on all this data, here are a few actionable insights for farmers trying to navigate this whole situation. Number 1, lean into those policy-favored lower input crops. Increase your area under pulses and millets so you can benefit from those MSP hikes and slash your fertilizer needs. 2, if you are on marginal rain-fed land, you need to delay sowing. Wait for a stable monsoon pattern so you aren't forced to re-sow if an early dry spell hits. And 3, minimize non-essential tillage and really optimize your irrigation to aggressively manage that crazy expensive diesel.
Now, for the agronomists, policymakers, and agri-tech startups out there, the action plan is just as clear. We need immediate, localized heat and moisture stress advisories deployed directly to farmers. We need financial tools that embed parametric El Niño insurance, meaning policies that automatically pay out based on very specific rainfall or temperature triggers. And finally, policy really needs to scale diversification incentives, like that maize for paddy cash support, far beyond just Punjab, expanding it into other groundwater-stressed regions.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with this really stark quote from independent analysts. India's fertilizer security is hanging by a thread if the Iran-Hormuz crisis drags on. I mean, wow. This is the hidden looming risk. Sure, stocks might look comfortable today, but if these geopolitical tensions aren't resolved soon, the late Kharif and Rabi seasons could be looking at a severe input shock.
And that leads us to our final overarching question for today. With a hostile El Niño developing and soaring global input costs pressing down from every angle, will India's rural economic engine stall in 2026? Or will this dual crisis actually force the ultimate long-overdue structural diversification of Indian agriculture? It is a massive high-wire act, and the data certainly gives us a lot to think about. Thanks so much for exploring this with me on The Explainer today. Keep an eye on those systems and keep learning.